Hey guys, Ron here. Good evening, afternoon, day, whatever time it happens to be for you. Uh, 52 degrees tonight. A couple of weeks ago, it was like 75 at night. Now, I know what you're saying. He's crazy. Big deal, 52 degrees. But 52 degrees in Southern California is, to me, it's cold. And I grew up in the desert. I grew up in the Palm Springs area for about 8 years, where it could still be 95 degrees at night, which is too hot. But 52 is pretty cold. Actually, it gets that cold there too. The temperatures are extreme in the desert. Hotter summers, colder winters. Anyway, I'm here walking around the boats tonight, and I just want to pose a question. I think this is going to be kind of a short video, but it's a question that's been of interest to me for a long time. In Mostly, I've been speculating on the answers to it, and I wanted to pose it to you folks, subscribers and non-subscribers, because I get so many intelligent, well thought out, thoughtful questions and comments. Well, I mean, comments, I should say, and some questions that I wanted to pose it to you guys because I know you guys are a bright group. And so, mainly, this is for the purpose of starting a dialogue or a conversation. And my question is to you guys, or comment, or just food for thought, is that do you think Charles Manson was, beyond everything he was, do you think that he was drug dealer to the stars and or Hollywood, and maybe a pimp as well? Because I think that Charlie Manson was a lot more well known in Hollywood and the music industry from the time for only that 2 year period, from 67 when he got out of prison, well, maybe late 67, early 68, when he also traveled seemingly without the consent of his parole officers. Manson got away with a lot of things, just like Lee Harvey Oswald, that Manson shouldn't have, and there's no explanation for why he did. Anyway, but do you think it's possible in that year and a half, that he was much more well-known, or actually well-known or infamous in Hollywood or the music industry? Because, people aren't going to admit it. So, who knows? Except maybe Neil Young. Neil Young talks about no bit. So, we all know that Charlie Manson, through sheer luck, got to live with and befriend Dennis Wilson, the drummer of the Beach Boys, in 1968 into 1969, and got to ingratiate himself with the band, with the Beach Boys, and through them, Terry Melcher, the Beach Boys producer, who may or may not have promised to record Manson, did get Manson into a recording studio. But beyond that, Manson had this way of really, it seems like he just must have had this incredible charisma or something that even, when Terry Melcher finally had to testify, Terry Melcher basically got a gun, got a bodyguard. He was on sedatives. He was really scared of Manson. But at first, he was very intrigued by him. I think that Manson used the lure of the girls. I know he did. But I guess my question is, we know that Manson did write a song called Cease to Exist, which was sort of co-opted by Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. And the Beach Boys actually recorded it on their 2020 album in 1969 with new lyrics and a new title. It's called Never Learn Not to Love. Creepy song. You should hear it if you haven't heard it. Even in its Dennis Wilson incarnation, you can just tell it's got that Manson creepy vibe. But anyway, there's talk of Manson hanging around Capitol Records with the Beach Boys, where there's talk of Manson going to nightclubs and clearing the dance floor because he was just so charismatic as he spun around. The guy had this, I believe, this really evil charisma about him. Anyway, there are conflicting statements in the case. All anybody really knows about Manson is the Tate LaBianca murders, maybe the Gary Hinman murder that preceded them. and the Manson family, the ones who actually went to jail for the Tate LaBianca murders. But there was a lot more, and I've gone into it in depth in other videos. Manson started gathering up women in his life shortly after he got out of prison. The first one was a woman named Mary Bruner. And Mary Bruner in 1967 was, I believe she was working at the library at, Berkeley. I mean, she had a job, she had an apartment, she had what they would call a quote unquote straight life, meaning she was not a hippie or a yippie or a druggie. And she gave it all up to travel with this scruffy little ex-con. And then came Squeaky Fromm, Lynn Fromm, who he found crying on a sidewalk in Venice. And he said, "I bet your father is your problem." And she said, "Oh my God, how did you know?" Good guess. And Susan Atkins, who was, among other things, working in topless reviews in San Francisco, and working and laying in a coffin in a satanic ritual show at night. I mean, really bizarre stuff. And of course, drugs, major factor. And he told her how beautiful she was, and to look at herself in the mirror, she was so beautiful. And before long, Manson just had said all the right words to so many of these women, and had large contingent of women followers who literally followed him. And then he started gathering up men too, and women to attract the men. And of course there were selfish reasons too, because Manson was infamously bisexual, especially after spending those many years in prison. And I guess my point is, and this is getting already long-winded and rambling, is that Manson, I don't believe for a second that Manson just hung out quietly in Spawn Ranch, or quietly hung out in Barker Ranch out in the desert. In fact, they opened a nightclub for a while, an illegal nightclub at Spawn Ranch. Eventually the cops closed down. The cops were there so many times at Spawn Ranch, and then eventually even at Barker Ranch in the desert. Manson could have been rearrested on any number of parole violations, including weapons charges. Why wasn't he? He had just been out for a year or two of prison. Why was he allowed such latitude? It's kind of like, why was Lee Harvey Oswald allowed back into America unscathed after renouncing his citizenship, telling the American government he was going to tell the Soviets war secrets of our military because he had been a Marine. But he's let back in. He comes eventually to live in Dallas after New Orleans. New Orleans, hotbed of the mafia, by the way, Carlos Marcello. And nobody's watching Oswald. Nothing. And nobody apparently was watching Manson either. Like I said, a repeated parole violator. So very strange questions. Very strange, very strange. I mean, there's all kinds of theories. Some of the theories are that Manson was like being used by the either the law enforcement or the FBI or something to I don't know. They knew he was agitating bikers and the Black Panthers, and maybe they were going to use him to eliminate some of these undesirables. I mean, it's crazy theories, but he certainly was given large latitude in ways that he never should have been. Anyway, so I believe it's entirely possible. Well, let's back up. Let's talk about some things about Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski, and even the LaBiancas. There's a lot of dark rumors about both of these groups of people, and again, I don't want to. It's a fine line between, you don't want to bash, especially victims of these horrific murders that nobody deserved. But there are questions about the kind of activities they were involved in, and if it somehow led to these association with Charles Manson and his family, or just Manson. Roman Polanski, it is said, and I'll tell you some of the speculation. It's said that Polanski and Sharon Tate basically had an open marriage. Polanski was quite the womanizer. In fact, he was so much of a womanizer that it ended his ability to stay in America, where he is still a refugee from America because he can't come back or he'd be prosecuted for statutory rape. Anyway, but they were, a wild, somewhat young, definitely her, Hollywood couple. There are rumors, even Roman Polanski himself mocked the rumors at the press conference he gave when he came back about orgies at the house, sex parties. But my point is, if you do enough research, you will find so-called quotes, sorry, I shouldn't say so-called, but supposed quotes by various members of the Manson family saying that one of the main motivators, if not the main motivator, of the Tate LaBianca murders was drugs. That it is said that, let's say Tex Watson, for instance, that Tex Watson had a fairly healthy drug dealing operation going on outside of his life with the Manson family, and that he was quite independent, and that even he and Leslie Van Houten sort of had a relationship that was not well known within the Manson family. In fact, the shooting, Manson shooting Bernard Crowe, aka Lots of Papa, who he thought was a Black Panther, which basically led to the immediate paranoia that Manson felt after or just preceding the Tate LaBianca murders. That went down because Charlie was there to sort of rescue another one of Tex's girlfriends, Rosita, who was being held captive by Lots of Papa, and it was over a drug deal. It was over Tex Watson basically trying to either take the buy money or take the drugs. I don't remember which it was, but there was drug dealing going on within the Manson family. They were dealing to the Straight Satans, which was the motorcycle group, and that was another thing. They had got some Manson family acquired some bad drugs. I don't remember if it was LSD, and then the Straight Satans, a lot of these motorcycle gang members got sick. And they, of course, vowed vengeance against the Manson family. So we know there is evidence that they were dealing drugs, and were doing anything for money to prepare for the Armageddon of Helter Skelter, if you believe that part of the story, and just to get money. So the other part of the story is that supposedly there were a lot of what should I say? Well, there were drug parties and sex parties, for lack of a better term, going on primarily at Cass Elliott's house and at Cielo Drive, where Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate were renting the home there. And Jay Sebring's home. One of the theories is that there was S&M parties going on where that the crowd that was hanging around Cass Elliott that interviewed a guy named Pick Dawson, who was associated with a drug dealer, I believe it's Jamaican, who was associated with Cass Elliott. And I've talked about this about Cass. And John Phillips, the late John Phillips and Mama Papas, talked about what he called the seedy people that were feeding off Cass and living off Cass. Supposedly not only drug parties, but these drug parties devolved into picking up hippies on the Sunset Strip, giving them drugs, involving them in S&M, in rape, all kinds of things. Perhaps filming escapades. There's rumors of film of Peter Sellers and Yul Brynner and others having sex together and with other people. And, again, all speculation. But if you read 50 books on a subject, you're going to get a lot of different speculation, a lot of theories. Bottom line is, I think It's highly possible, although I don't have proof, and no one in the Manson family has come out definitively and said it, which is odd. I will admit that, you know, they might have, by this time, you'd imagine they'd come out and admit it, but some of them have hinted at it. But I believe that Charlie Manson was involved in dealing drugs and in the drug trade and in partying with a lot of the Hollywood elite. Had he met any of his victims, you know, there's theories that Jay Sebring was certainly, and that his associates were dealing drugs out of his salons, and that Wojciech Frykowski was definitely dealing drugs and involved with drugs, involved with drugs obviously and taking them, but in selling drugs. I think, so again, did the Manson family ever come in contact with any of their victims prior to the slaughter that took place on Cielo Drive because of drug dealing? I don't know, but I think it's possible. I really do. And I think that starting with Manson's association with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, you know, Denny Wilson knew everybody, not just other musicians. And we know Neil Young admits to knowing Manson in Topanga Canyon. I think that Charlie Manson was a lot more well-connected. Wow, these guys are loud tonight, huh? I think Charlie Manson was very well-connected. It's possible. I think that he pimped out his women to Hollywood celebrities, maybe even movie executives or film executives, but especially maybe record executives, guys in the record industry, music industry. And I think that there was a lot of drug dealing, and I think that Manson was either a moderate player in the drug trade in Los Angeles in 68 and 69, or a major player. It's something that obviously, I admit, it would be pretty embarrassing for celebrities of those days to come forward afterwards willingly and say, you know, yeah, I bought some smack off Manson and the family. Yeah, we bought, you know, some acid. We partied with them in their creepy ranch out in, you know, Simi Valley once, but never again. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, if you read, you know, and before the internet, I was reading books, and I still read books. I'm a book lover. If you read from 50 different sources, you're going to get a lot of speculation, because, hey, that's freedom of speech, right? You can print anything or say anything. I don't know how much fact-checking goes in. But give me your thoughts on that, folks. Do you think that it's possible, and I'm just saying possible, that Manson was more of a player around the LA entertainment industry, Hollywood, and the music industry than we know about today, that has been confirmed anyway? I mean, he bragged about it, but can you believe anything that Charlie Manson ever said? Who knows? Do you think it's possible he was a player in that industry, and that celebrities, you know, won't admit it or wouldn't admit it? I mean, certainly it is said that after the murders, and including after the arrest of the Manson family, that a lot of celebrities were really scared. Gun sales soared. It said that all of LA's sewer system was stoned because everybody was flushing their drugs. The celebrities were flushing their drugs down the toilet. Why? Why were the celebrities so paranoid all of a sudden? Was word out in the industry that Manson had his people do this, and that they were next because they, you know, had been involved in drugs with him, or burned him on a drug deal, or just by virtue of being associated with him? Who knows? Anyway, it's an interesting subject as we listen to the music in Spanish from El Torito behind me. Can't see me here. All right, guys, well, I guess I'll call it here. No point in looking at me in the dark, so let's go look at these guys and listen to the music. All right, guys, Ron here. If you like the channel, I work hard at it. I'm trying to build it up. I'm only getting pennies from it now, literally pennies in revenue. Hopefully someday I'll get enough to provide gas money for a day. That would be nice, and beyond, because I really do this through sheer passion, the love of it, and I love engaging with you guys too. So subscribe if you haven't already. please give the channel likes. I'd really appreciate it. Hit the bell icon, and you'll be notified when I post. And I will see you guys at the next location. Hopefully it'll be warmer. I picked the one jacket also that won't zip up. All right, guys. See you. Bye-bye.